One problem in philosophy is this idea of reductionism. So, this is largely what the science looks at a little bit, or the initial approach to science, part of the approach to science, the idea of reductionism. And it's basically that you can reduce all causal force, causal action to the lowest level. And really, not just that, but also the idea that, when science tries to study a phenomenon, one particular one at a time, right? Science tries to study one particular phenomenon at a time to a certain level. So they study something to a certain level, such like, you know, how the liquids in a bottle react and things like that. Like they study it to like the chemical level, and then you can study things like how your body absorbs the water or the tea and shit. You know what I'm saying? Like you can study shit to that level, okay? Or like even higher level, like what happens when you drop this whole thing. You're not studying the same shit that you're studying really. Like there's one level you're studying the chemical reactions, another level you're studying the aggregate of all those chemicals, like individual reactions, kind of like molecular levels, like how the whole thing's gonna interact. Like those are like the basic levels. Like science will isolate those and study one particular one, kind of. And so one premise is that it all happens like when it really, well, the big conclusion is consciousness, that all consciousness comes down to like the fundamental level, like neuronic level. Or, I mean, it would really go on below that, really. But like, like this is a premise. It was basically one of the major premises of this class I was taking. Like, can consciousness be reduced to the neurons, or like, can you really do psychology? Or like, will neuroscience basically have all the answers instead? Like, you wouldn't need psychology for causal explanation because neuroscience would have all the answers, okay? And that's reductionism, that like, but you're saying that like there's no, like, neuroscience is more fundamental, and that tells you how causal action will occur in this space-time manifold, you know? And that's what science really wants to study, causal action within the space-time manifold and the different levels of that. And so they reduce all explanation of causal action to like some fundamental level. What fundamental level? I mean, that's not even clear necessarily. Or, you really get down to like the fundamental uh, level, like quantum mechanics or something, and shit's just, it's a whole different laws. I mean, like that shit doesn't work the same anymore. Like things move like in a quantum entanglement, like they move like at the same time, like they're like connected somehow, but they're like across space and time and like shit, like, you know. And so one of the big things is that like reductionism is not. I don't think it's a very good philosophy. Like I think we need to consider alternatives to reductionism. And because with reductionism you reduce consciousness to this like you say like, oh, but it doesn't really necessarily make sense, because reductionism is missing the connection between all the different levels you can reduce things to. You see what I'm saying? Like if you're saying that like the specific neurons move in a certain way, and those neurons have like certain exact properties, and when they interact with another neuron, like it's going to interact that way every time. So if you knew someone's exact brain state in every single level to that, every single thing you needed to know to that certain neuronal of the level of the neurons, like you could then explain all their behavior from then on, because that's all the interactions were going on. But that doesn't allow for this dynamic change that can happen from another level, like such as some of the psychological level. Like if you study the neurons, like the neurons, there could be an overarching force moving the neurons, like a higher level of control. It'd be like just studying the pieces in a video game and how like everything's going to go in the video game without knowing what the actual player's going to do. You can't say everything that's going to happen in a video game without knowing what the player's going to do. right? Like the level, like if you study the computer bits of the video game and like everything that's happening at that point, like you're not gonna be like you're missing out on a big part of the like a big part that can control shit. Like you don't know what the player's gonna do, right? So, but there's all kinds of players. So where it comes down to is it's missing this like dynamic interaction. Like we're dynamically interacting, and there's action happening at higher level, like in between the levels. Like so, I'm saying like some overarching force. If you can imagine like a bunch of uh, like it's not like all the individual particles of water all decide to move up and down at the same time. Like it's this whole wave controlling it that's moving it up and down the whole time. Like not just each individual. So I just bumped the computer there. That's why I was like, you know. I was on a good topic there though. Been going, man. Been chilling. So now let's just calm down and talk to each other. No, I need to go on this little rant here. I need to keep going. That's how I'm coming with. Yeah. So the fuck was I talking about? It was good though. So, it's this overall interaction between the states that matters. Like we need to look at like this level, like non-reductionism, that like there's an overarching force, and what it comes down to is some dynamic interactionism. It's not like everything from the Big Bang is one continued and linear progression. Like or it's not all just like a linear thing here. This is a dynamic system. The universe is a dynamic system, and all the entities in it are players in the video game. Okay, and they interact with the universe, and that's all so then that provides causal action. Now, what the fuck does it really mean to be a player? You know what I'm saying? It's like, does that mean like dualism in a philosophy where there's like the material states of the universe and separate, like the spirit, the soul, separate from the universe itself, from the computer code of the video game? Which, a lot of shit about the universe is like computer code in a video game, or just computer code. Like it's just like the fundamental, it's all bits of information. Beyond space and time, information that's timeless. Trying to figure out what the information is. I keep figuring. People keep saying like, "Oh, it's all information and shit." Like, there's big things in physics. Like they say it's information, but like, it's like, all right, so what the fuck is information? Like, what is it? Information. Like, what is it? Okay, it's not. It's like breaks down to like matter is really energy. Like it's all just energy. And then they'll, it's like, but energy is all just information. What's information? Best I can come up, like the best I've found, put together of like trying to answer that question. What is information? Like it's all matter, it's all energy, it's all information. Comes down to mathematical states. Maybe it would look better if I squared up my chair here, Squared up my chair. Square. Math. Cube. Four-dimensional cube? See, the four-dimensional stuff is weird. I need to figure that. I need to look into that. I have looked into it a lot. But I still just the actual. So it's like so the answer of what information is it comes down to, I think the best I can make sense is like the geometric states, and it's fundamentally like some people will say like geometric states of the space-time field, or even really this unified field because it's beyond space and time, which okay, so beyond space and time, what exactly are they saying here? Of saying there's there's states beyond geometric states beyond space and time, or anything beyond space and time. Fuck it. Now it's been this one I've been trying to figure out for a while. And I guess I can make sense of like a square being outside of time, sort of, because it's just there. Oh, like it's just a space without any time to it. It's like a smaller, like a lower level of dimensions or something, Dimensions. Fuck dimensions. Man, I've been fucking trying to fuck with dimensions and figure dimensions have been fucking with me for a long time. Really hard. Like, it's been cool. I like it though. So I mean, I guess I masturbate. No, the dimensions are different. Well, I'm a dimension, so maybe it is. We do make love. I fuck dimension. I don't fuck her. I love her. But dimensions isn't even. I mean, dimensions, man. What the fuck are the dimensions? Reductionism and dimensions. This is good shit right here. Because reductionism is the kind of mainstream belief. Like, if anybody says, like, oh, you don't have free will, the soul doesn't exist. The soul. See, alright. We don't. It's not. The religions, and I'll talk about this in other videos, like, they don't need to be your sole authority. What the fuck is the soul? I mean, and I don't think the point is it matters saying like, oh no, man, if you don't call it the soul, then you don't know what it is, bro. You gotta know, you gotta have some soul. What is this soul? I think it's this deep down intrinsic feeling, because it's ultimately all feeling. It's this feeling of being that you, and it feels great, man. Feels awesome. You gotta have some soul. Some soul. Woo, yeah, some soul music. Yeah, some music. Woo. No, see, I kind of ruined it. I should have gone with the yeah. See, I needed some more connections here. And that's it, dude. All right, see when all the humans are getting in a bigger connection, now they're riding a new wave, right? They're riding this new wave of connection. So now they aren't reduced to the simple human states. They're connected higher on this wave. They're not reduced. See, because it's not reduction of the causal action. So there's this higher connection here. And that's actually a thing. And so there's this dynamic relationship between all these connections. So there's not just reduced states where everything's reduced to the fundamental state. There is smaller states, but it's all these other smaller systems that are connected in this dynamic relationship of feedback, like a player in a video game. They're, the intrinsic awareness, something down is the player, and the rest of the universe is like the video game. And you can't just explain it all from the one point. You have to understand the interaction, the dynamic feedback loop system, which is really the exchange of information. So, and what this information is these fundamental states of geometry. I guess I don't know. I really don't know. This is. So I'll say this like this is. I'm not saying like this is for sure going on or not. Just saying this is part of that theory. Or you could say like this is a hell of a lot better view than reductionism. Okay, I think that's a fair point really to make. I feel like I should comb my hair, but I'm not. See, I got this hair, grows on your head. You probably have some. Nah. Yeah, but so I've been growing out my hair, and just it's been more work than I wanted it to be. I thought it would just kind of just. I don't know. I didn't really put much thought into it. I just was like, I'm gonna grow out my hair, and now it's just kind of goofy looking. Well, that's okay because I'm a goofy guy. I'm a goofy goober. And I think that's a cool thing. I think we should all be a little more goofy. Very goofy. It's fun. And what else do we want to do than have fun? And you know what's wrong with the whole our whole system, society, kind of, is that we're not doing it right on our consciousness. So, because the leading view, the leading philosophical view, kind of is reductionism, and it doesn't, and then so there's this overarching, structural imposition of kind of the reductionist philosophy a little bit here, and whether it's obvious, like whether it's like explicit or implicit, kind of, I mean, whether it's like obvious or not, like it's kind of this whole chain. And that's part of the big issue, is because we don't understand our consciousness, and that's important because that's what we are. We're not just, the consciousness isn't separated from its conscious states. So the seer and the seen are one and the same. And that's kind of really important detail. And, well, I don't know that, I guess, really. Like, so that's part of it, though. So you can say that there's a fundamental, so like the dualistic philosophy is that, like, there is, the player in the game, so there's the computer code of the universe, and then, like, we're the player interacting with it, and and so ultimately I would say I think it's not it like that's almost there, but like really ultimately the computer code and the computer are one and the same, because it's really just this dynamic feedback loop, and it's all just like the experience. So even if it was different, like there is something else, like there is, like right now, like we are in a computer, like, you know what I mean, like that seems to be a fair assessment of what's going on, like we are the one player interacting with our whole network of, well, I mean, just the whole universe, and how else it comes to us, whether it's networked or we're like alone having our own like player experience, which, I mean, it's just possible. I mean, then theoretically, like every other experience would be possible too, and it would be happening just as much, because, like, why wouldn't it? It's like, this is what there is. You're this guy. That's existence. Like, whoa, this guy? I mean, okay, what? What? There's a lot of better people to be, for sure. Like, wow, what? Why would you just be this guy? But so of course there's. I mean, of course you're not. I mean, but just gotta consider that. I mean, but you might be alone in your own context, which then it's like, well, what's the fuck? I mean, so it's like, if everybody can interact with the universe, and like you can make one decision, and that like creates its own timeline in like the entire multiverse of timelines of every potential. So like you're just potential, like, like in Rick and Morty, he's like, I'm Morty from C137, or something like that. Like, but then again, but it'd be infinite theoretically, unless you have some kind of classification system that I don't know. Well, it'll still be infinite. What a classification system you have, I guess. But what would keep you connected to somebody else who also made a decision if you like split off timelines? Which, I mean, I think there can be something like that, but there has to be some overall control there. But, like, there might be that because it's not reduced to our individual decisions necessarily. You can look at and identify the causal action from a higher sort of behavioral system. Now, that's not, no, that's, what is this? But that doesn't mean we don't have choice within it. I mean, I'm just like, maybe that's like part of the whole thing. I mean, what's really going on there? And then like there wouldn't just be one overall other source, to be like other ones and higher and higher and higher and higher. And, theoretically, that should go on for infinite. Like, how can there's, you know? But that is part of the big theory. I mean, the alternate to reductionism, one that actually. So ultimately, like, what we are is just as deep as you can go, I'd say, would be to say existence itself, perceiving itself as such. You know what I'm saying? Like, what else can you really say that you are? I mean, you'd be like, oh, I'm a person. My consciousness only comes from my body. Therefore, I'm like the body. But, I mean, the body is part of the whole, it's like this and the body are both part of the whole field of stuff going on. Like, so if when you die, your body just, it's just matter now. But when you're alive, it's not. It's alive matter. The fuck's alive matter? Oh, because it's reductionism, and there's no explanation for that. Really? I mean, now there's. I mean, I'm sure they'll be like, no, we do have an explanation, and this, we do. Well, I mean, that's cool. I mean, alive matter. That was kind of funny. I mean, I guess it's like, oh, now it's alive matter and it's dead matter. No, obviously it's like many people have like been on this, and like there is, as far as I've looked into it, but like I can't. It's not part of a whole. There's within within certain contexts, like with reductionism doesn't really have that, but you'd say it doesn't need it in your defense or something. I mean, you'd be like, well, that's not what does what. I mean, so basically, what I've been talking about, right, is like reductionism is kind of the leading theory, or like reductionism is a big part of our academic philosophy. And whether it's like supported or not, like the point isn't how much other people believe in reductionists. The point is it's that that's the other kind of belief. So like it's to spell that out, to spell it all out. There's the reductionistic view, which denies any kind of free will, really, and all that. Like it denies. It's just saying, it's like, oh, there is just a bunch of matter, and that's what's fundamental to the existence, man. Existence is just, little balls of matter, like just dead little balls of matter, just like little things, dude. And they just happen to arrange themselves in a certain way, which really arrange themselves in a certain way means create basic geometric shapes, right? Which so that's, but it's not just like it's just all kinds of this random exchange arrangement, and that creates this brief glimpse of awareness only from this particular specimen, and then but it's all just random and but your consciousness isn't real, like, dude. It's just some illusion from the actual states. The actual little tiny states moving and interacting randomly. That's the essence of existence, dude. And there's really not much more to it, dude. That's just what existence is. It's like, okay, but it seems like maybe we might want to say, like, well, what about like the feeling of being and thinking, it's and comprehending, and like just that feeling, that awareness, that mental thing. I want to say like acumen, but I don't really feel that's right. It's not the right thing to use there. I don't know why I mentioned it. And that's yeah, the green tea. So the first time I drank it, I feel like I was playing with it a lot, and I really wanted to drink it, but I'm like, nah, I shouldn't drink it. Don't drink it. That'd be weird, just drinking a green tea while you're making a video, dude. And I was like, kind of like, don't drink it, and that's how I was just like playing with it. But then I really wanted to drink it. I was like kind of thirsty the whole time, and I was like, dude. And then I just kind of did it. I just kind of did it without really thinking that much about it. Just kind of went on a really rant and just kind of did it. Well, yeah, I don't really have a big point there. It's just, that is, So your mental cause action, certainly, it's not as simple as like you cause like every single little movement of this dude here. I cause all that action, that movement. So like causing the particles to move. So you're saying it's just random little particles, and my awareness is has no causal force towards it. It's just random. That you reduce the explanation to saying that there's no such conscious force behind it, or like this certain thing there. You Yeah, like so that you deny that exists. So you deny. So, but the another view would be to say that you are this thing that exists that may cause all the action. So you don't reduce it. Like you have this overarching causal action. You know, like that's you. But what the fuck are you for the whole universe perceiving itself in this certain manner to cause the action that it wants? But does that mean you do or do not have free will? But why not? Yeah. Because ultimately, the universe isn't within the context of space and time. Because space and time can only be defined within the context of the universe. You see? Because the universe isn't like our space, like this space and this time, isn't like somewhere and somewhere in some place, I use somewhere to mean somewhere in time and somewhere in space, and then I realized I said the same thing. Sometime, I guess is what I meant. Yeah. Somewhere and sometime. Because, if you think of like a timeline, somewhere on the timeline. Because I was like, somewhere and somewhere. I was like, no, I thought I was saying something different there. And then I'm like, I see what I did. Somewhere and sometime. Like, where is it? Well, see, that's not really the point, though. I mean, so, like, that's the thing. I think there's definitely a deeper level. Like, what I'm saying is, does this mean there's dualism? Like, there's just a fundamental separate thing. And, like, actually, to clarify, really, and this is very important here, and this is part of Descartes fucking us all up, the Cartesian philosophy, as it's called. Sometimes they just take out the day. I don't know why. Descartes, Cartesian. I guess no one really bothers to ask, but it's, because it's kind of obvious. Like, well, because day means the, and you know why? Because day Cartesian was just too many syllables, and we figured it was easier just to go with Cartesian, so just, why, no one questions it, because you understand what's, all right. So, it's the Cartesian philosophy, like, really separated that was saying that there's this separate spirit that is like, there's the player and then there's a game. And he was saying that God set in motion the game, like the video game player, analogy. God set in forth the game, like created it, and we're the player. And what God is really, I mean, it's really not. I mean, there's differences in how you could look at this, but like really in his, well, actually, I guess that's my point. Like, So you can think of like God as like some separate thing from the player and the game that creates the player and the game. Or and so like what that's what Descartes was saying, right? Okay, so Descartes saying that like yeah, basically that God's something separate from the whole thing that creates both the player and the game. And so like the science view is that no, there's just a game, no player, no God. Okay, take that analogy a little farther, right? And that so it's kind of okay, but when thinking of God as something separate that had to have created the player or the game, it's not. The game is its own player, okay? And it's all one thing. The game and the player are one. And so, what does that mean about God? Well, there are views about God a little more towards that. But Descartes' separation between the player and the game and all this set forth this idea of God. So around that time was like Descartes was like fucking 1400s, I believe, around there. Okay, some more context. So like 1400s, we're now going into the fucking like Renaissance, scientific revolution, and like all that shit kind of comes out of here a little bit. We come out from this like second set of dark ages or something, and like so like basically this whole scientific revolution, which kind of quickly led to the industrial revolution, which you know so that's kind of around that whole time is a big separation. Big separation here, okay, between initially it was Descartes' separation between the player and the game, okay, because our ancestors really, saw that the player and the game were one, but that doesn't mean there's not a player, which kind of some of the science which is born out of that. So really, like, the science is born kind of from Descartes' separation. So Descartes came up with that separation. Kind of. It wasn't like he did all, like, obviously there's wasn't one guy and one thing and one, Aristotle was a big part, and that was way earlier. So this is kind of the second coming of the kind of a second scientific revolution, which came out of this time. And part of it was to separate the superstition of the time, the religious superstition of like all the kind of shit, you think about what people thought way back then, like in those periods. That was British now. That wasn't even fucking British. I just exaggerated the other, but I guess it's what did it sound like? All right, so you got those periods there. Well, no, it's not like one at all. So I'll just get down to the actual point here, which wasn't really about history necessarily. It's about the philosophy of it. Yeah, so the just hang with me. It'll come back to me pretty quick. I should go for some green tea because this has been good shit. Come out with it's like I know it's just, if I could pause or figure out how to edit videos, I'd take a lot of this out here. But maybe I did, maybe I didn't. Now we're back. And we're live! So, with Descartes, it's like this separation between, it was soul and nature, the game. Separation between the player and the game. In order for science to be justified in a little bit, it's extrapolation maybe, maybe not. the science to be justified is separation between that and like the superstition between God. Like God set forth a machine. That's how the machine-like video. And this is exactly what I talked about in the other video of the machine-like view. I think I explained it better in this one, personally. But go watch that one if you haven't watched this one. They're different, really. And so it's Descartes, and this kind of led to the reductionistic view. The reductionistic view, is the one today, which basically they got rid of the idea that God created the machine and just looked at studying the machine without worrying about how and why it was created. Science just wanted to study, it points they study how and why, and like obviously you can still ask that and study science in a reductionistic context, in which plenty of people do, and which they should, I sometimes turn this light on. Yeah, there we go. But now I just kind of made this video on the willy-nilly, and so I just having fun with it. But that's just good shit. We got some good shit out there. Who's we? I do that sometimes. I don't care. But it's because you gotta be real with yourself, one, and just be everything. Like, just be cool. I don't know. That's not the point. I should wrap this up because there's some good shit here. So, I guess my whole point was we're getting back to this. So science says this reduction. That was the initial point, reduction. Okay, so the reduction is a kind of the basic thing, and that doesn't really understand the whole interactions. So let's wrap it. Yeah, all right, got this. We're going to put these two together here. The reductionism view and the idea of the player in the game analogy, because they're not fully together yet. I'm going to wrap this up here. And this all, because it all comes down to these. I never found that comb. I guess I never really looked. Right. So it all comes down to these feedback loops. And everything, there's all these systems interacting, and they're all players with their own playing ability. Because being a player isn't. I think it goes into something. The theory and the math works out to suggest, okay, that all the information goes into the player, and the player puts out, and the player makes its own choice, like kind of just like a video game, and like you have the information of the game, and then you react. So it's a dynamic thing. It's not a linear, just the information states interacting with themselves. There's like the players have a dynamic, like you interact with the game, and then the game changes. When the game changes, you interact with the game changes, you change your interaction, so there's this constant feedback. That's what that's where it's this feedback of information. This is this dynamic thing. Okay? And this is like an alternate view of reductionism, right? It's this feedback of relations with this dynamic instead of this linear, that it's all just these particles interacting with each other. Okay? This is like, that's what kind of some of the mainstream views don't really. And see, that's, you could say like, oh no, now they've come farther than I think there's still like this, in the philosophical sense, this lingering billiard ball universe mentality. Even though like science clearly does not support the billiard ball universe. So it's like there's almost no scientists that go, oh yeah, it's just hard particles interact on, because the billiard ball universe is the idea that, things, causal interaction happens when things just hit each other. Didn't necessarily want to bring the lighter into it, and didn't really realize it was the first thing I grabbed, and then I was like, well, that's not that matters. This guy's got a lighter! Watch out! He can make fire! What was he gonna do with that fire? Fire is kind of dangerous, though, you know what I mean? Like, you can do a lot of things, like damage with some fire. Like, it's just like a little lighter, and it's just like way more than you can do with I was gonna say your cell phone, but you can do a lot of damage with your cell phone. Not just because if you throw it at somebody, but like, which isn't nowhere near fire. But like, think about what you can do with you could like cause so much action with that cell phone, you know? Like you could tell somebody to order a pizza and then like have them order pizza and then have like another guy order pizza and then have them like fight with each other, which there was some meme a while ago. But I was just thinking about it's like I could do some more whatever, but you could always think about it. I mean, you could cause the potentialities. I don't know. The possibilities are infinite. Yeah, I think potentiality is the word. Potentialities. Actually, I don't even know if potentiality is a word. Potentiality. It's potential. It's a potentiality because it's potentially a reality. What the fuck's going on? All right, whatever. So what do we know? We can say here, all right, yeah, reductionism based on how it's just these like individual, like you can reduce it all. So like saying like you can just reduce it all to the neuronal states because there's no overall player to like there's no dynamic relationship there for the neuronal states to change. There's no overarching like, if you imagine them all like going around in a circle, okay, and what they do is they just like go around in a circle over like an axis point, like which isn't necessarily just neurons don't really, I don't know, but like it's just going around like a little circle, like a orbit, like what makes the whole circle move? It's the axis point of the orbit, not the circles all deciding to move together. And if you reduce it just to like how the circles interact, you might not really understand how there's like some other force there, and that's important. And that's like basically, it's not like, I mean, it's not so like, it's just a basic thing there. And so, what the point is they're all little, like, all these things are actually players in the video game. And that's what creates the video game, is ultimately created by a network of players. That's the other philosophical view, kind of, I think. Now, okay, no, that's what I think it is. I really don't. I mean, that's what I've been gathering, and that's like a lot of support for this, like like regular science stuff support, like shit. Like you read these papers, and you're just like, Jesus, this is so sciencey. But that's what it is. It's a fucking science paper. Like it's not, you know what I mean? It's not like somebody writing their blog, like, and just saying all this shit. Like there's like these deep fucking academic papers. Academic papers can be so fucking parts that are boring. I love reading this shit, man. Like, and then a lot of them, are like pretty down to earth. Like, I was studying a lot of it, so I can imagine if you never really studied like some of the shit, like some quantum mechanics shit, and you're just like reading about it, you just be like, what? This is so fucking weird. Or no, well, you would think it's weird, hopefully, because well, maybe not. If you thought it was no, I was like, why wouldn't I? Fucking, why wouldn't things just move at speeds faster than light, potentially? What are they? I mean, do they really? I'm not going to make this about quantum mechanics, so whatever. Look into that yourself. Quantum mechanics. So what I'm saying is, okay, what the fuck does it mean to be a player in the game? Ultimately, maybe there's not. Well, there's the game. So what, maybe there's just a player. Instead of saying there's God who created the game and we're the players. Well, no, so the player and the game are one thing. Is it ultimately the player? I mean, no. I don't even know if that's really the point to get to, really. it's one and the same with the game. So sure, you know, it's I think it is like and ultimately it is the fundamental awareness of the existence doing it all, sort of, And but every little thing's its player having its own level of playing ability. So like, and then so everything is in like all these systems. So all the math works out to like how there's certain levels of systems. Like there's subatomic particles, and then there's like atoms, which are like their own atom player. Like it's a player that's an atom. Yo, this is Adam, and he's a player. You know. So and then it's like then there's like molecules, and then there's like cells and shit. And maybe there's other levels in between that are just like, but maybe it's not so rigid where the level is, and that's probably more of the case because it's more of this what defines what level. I mean, so there's a little more deeper shit than this that needs to be addressed, really. But this is kind of a basic explanation. And I mean, of course, I don't know more of the like, this is I know. I mean, we can only explain it so much, but this is a better explanation than reductionism, and it's a much better philosophy because it actually opens up the realms to do philosophy. I mean, just reductionism, if without free will, why bother doing philosophy? Well, you didn't have the choice. Exactly. So you don't have like if you didn't have the choice, why then wouldn't it be nice if we could choose a better philosophy and be like, oh, that would be nice, wouldn't it? It's like, well, so let's just pretend that we did have a choice and we did choose another philosophy. It's like, oh, but we can't. Am I doing a little, But it's like we don't have, just entertain the thought that maybe there is free will and try to explain it in the scientific context. What if we could do that? And things kind of, I mean, consciousness. It's, once that got into the picture and the trying to make sense of science of that, it was kind of either just, I mean, at first it was ignored, which, I mean, they just wanted to, that's what Descartes was kind of doing, was separating this for the sake of like separating God from its creation to say like, we can study this like a machine, like God created this machine so we can get the answers of how the machine works and figure out like, because God created it that way, instead of a more of a wholly dynamic, like the machine created itself that way. Maybe on purpose, maybe not so much. I mean, it's just no separation between like something creating, oh, well, the machine didn't do shit because there's no fucking machine. But, it's more of an organism. It's more of this living being. And that's what's up. Because it's more of this thing I mean, it's ultimately comes down to the existence itself. I mean, maybe there's definitely other levels of like, but ultimately something just has to exist without something else creating it. Or there's this infinite chain of, but then so maybe things just don't, the causation doesn't work like, so there's no like exterior thing to create our universe like that, but it's just like existence is, and existence is all its own thing creating itself, and that means that there is this creative, like an actually creative force. It's like scientists really don't have any explanation for creativity in the sense that like it's actually creative. You know what I mean? Like it's more just because there's nothing to actually create it. It's all just your neuronal states and progression, and you learn and you take in information, and the different I mean, it's not. I mean, it's like, oh no, they have an explanation for creativity. It's just all the reorganization of prior events, But that's not really creativity so much. And maybe it doesn't need to be. I mean, because the universe ultimately something had to be created, but I mean that implies a lot of shit about causality. So I mean, there's a lot of fuzzy wires here. Fuzzy wires. Is that even an expression? A lot of fuzzy wires, Ed. No, I mean that'd be literal. Like there's actually fuzzy wires. Like it's a little bit fuzzy here. I mean, of course it is. And so I mean, I don't even get into that, but the whole point of with the players in the game, if you got these players, like everything's its own player from these different levels, from atom to molecule to cell to organism, or even things like to organs and systems in the body. This is where you draw the line on these levels and all this, but each thing kind of has its own process of feedback of information in this dynamic relationship, just as much as we are the organism, which has its own level of feedback into this whole thing. So we cause feedback up and down. So like we're like, here on the whole connective feedback structures of interactions, and and then maybe so if consciousness is this correlated to this whole feedback structure, to say it is this whole feedback structure, well, what is it really? Maybe we don't even need to go there right now. But it's definitely a correlation that can be looked at, which can be shown in science. You don't necessarily, you want to explain the causation. Can they ever? You can always doubt that shit. It's like, wow, there's a real causation. We know there's a correlation, yeah, but where's the causal force? It's ultimately reduction. So, or is it? And so there's a correlation between consciousness and this whole feedback process. So the more we understand this, and so is the Earth conscious? Well, yeah, the Earth is conscious, and it's about the Earth has its own feedbacks, like loops, and the Earth influences us, and this can be shown through these electrodynamic interactions. Like the Earth has its own electromagnetic field, and like we have our own electromagnetic field, and like it's all this like information interacting with each other, which is ultimately, people say it's like vibration. It was ultimately the vibration of the fundamental geometric states, which that's what people say the information, or that's what makes most sense about like the information vibration of these geometric shapes, which then like changes the structure of the other geometry around, and like that's this dynamic interaction force, and like it's this like resonance system and all this shit of like it's like, and that's where you can do the math then on it of like mapping that out, and that's what people have done. Nassim Haramein, probably he's a big pioneer on that. But I mean, this has been going on forever. I mean, the ancient people knew about this shit, man. There are all kinds of like drawings. I mean, it's like sacred geometry with the circles. You may see, this is familiar. And I mean, anything like in that regard, all comes down to that shit. Anything that's just like a shape, crosses, stars. In certain ways, I mean, I don't fully understand that at all. But I mean, or just what people say, and it's all interacting. And so I guess I'll leave it like I don't really know what the player and the game are, but that's really kind of more of the philosophy we can work towards is figuring out, and doing this in the context in which we're looking at the reduction view and having a more sophisticated philosophical system that can also take into account like consciousness and science a little bit. As science is in the idea of doing the math mostly on it. But it's a dynamic system and not just a linear progression math, and that's and that's pretty cool. I mean, I think it's just really cool stuff, and we need. I mean, it's very important that we understand that, like, ultimately what's really important is the idea that, like, consciousness is not reducible, you know? So it's not, you are something. You can have causal influence. What you are is the universe itself, ultimately. And that's what you want to become in terms with. And what you want to do is resonate with the highest conscious state. Whatever you are, so you just want to, what you are is, just you want to figure out how to be the most happy state. It's like, well, yeah, I'm the universe, but I feel pretty shitty about being the universe right now. It's like, well, okay. Let's just work on feeling better. That's what we want to do. We just want to work on feeling better. Whether that means, we don't have things or we do have more things, or how we do with things and stuff and people, and society. We just want to feel better about being a being, right? You just want to be alive, exists consciously and make it fun, overall. That's what we want to do. What else do we want to do? Because we're this existence, existent, being existence, existent is existence. Yeah, it's kind of repetitive. being. And that's what you want. I mean, so how should we approach this? And especially when we consider that, this whole feedback structure, like we create something here, maybe this has causal influence and what we can do about it, and like how we work through all this, there's a lot of shit here. What are we going to do about all this? Well, probably change what we teach kids in school about reductionism and at least bring this, like, consider this more. And obviously, this is huge religious implications, or well, implications towards religion, that it's no separate God from nature. It's all one interactive system, and that's important. And that's really what more. And this is ultimately, though, I mean, it can be spiritual as fuck, man. I mean, you can just look at it however, but ultimately, the point is this deep connection towards what the existence is, what existence is, and just being and having that deep, having all like states of consciousness beyond the human reducible construct. So like those aren't the only two things, like reductionism or religion. Choose one or something. And really, I mean, the point is, even in that context, you could say, like science kind of just as a player, because they take out, or not, science, the mainstream reductionistic view. It's not. I don't really know if I should just be saying science, and then it's like, well, the science. I mean, science isn't one thing. It's a mainstream view, and still the mainstream view is like, well, the mainstream view here, the mainstream view here. I mean, what's the mainstream view? Or it's reductionism specifically doesn't just looks at it's just the game and no player, and that, like, you don't have that. There's no explanation there of how you can have any causal influence on your own reality. But the other, there's not only two views. Also, and like, that's a profound jump away from this kind of materialistic view. Ultimately, consciousness becomes a bigger and better thing, or whatever consciousness is, because it's ultimately all of it. Like, there's no existence without the consciousness, because the player and the game are one. And that's kind of the point. So you don't need to look at this separation between God and nature, and or just like, oh, it's not God, it's just this randomness, but it's like maybe there was like a different type of player that like created us, like where that player came from. I don't know, and that's not the point really. Maybe maybe that player wasn't that great. They kind of, maybe they want to control us, like we're their slaves. Like some player made us their slave. They made a little slave game here, and we're part of their little slave game, and but we're all still the one existence, because it's not, even if our whole, like, everything we sense is like some altered reality, like like the Matrix or something, like it's still it's anything that could have created that is still just as much a part of existence itself. You know what I mean? So like in the Matrix, there's this like what the people from the future or something. You know, the machines. Not coincidence. I mean, well, it's the machines or whatever. It doesn't mean it's something else creates this whole thing, whole reality. But they're still part of the true actual existence itself. And consciousness is the most important thing that can be to existence itself, even if there's something beyond this. And there, well, you know, there's got to be consciousness be not within the human body. Why would it only be limited to the human body? That's what I'm saying. And that's ultimately what you are. So you're not tied down to this body. Your consciousness is everything.